Okay, wait, let's rewind for a second. This right here is Benson, and he's honestly one of the most likable characters you'll ever meet. You see, one of the things that makes regular show so good of a series is its rewatchability. The show is so good that you can rewatch it at any stage in life, and depending on which stage you're watching it at, you might get a different perspective each time. So many of us remember watching the show as a kid, but rewatching the show again the older we get sheds light on so many different themes and characters that we might not have noticed the first time around. Characters that we once viewed as self-centered and unlikable now come off as just childish and immature, needing that next stage in life to push them to be something better. And characters that we once viewed as cool, we can take a step back, look at their actions, and realize that a lot of things that they did were really trashy. It's this difference of perspective that you get from rewatching regular show the older you get that makes not only the series but also its characters better over time. And out of all the characters in regular show, I don't think a single one benefits more from this than our favorite gumball machine, Benson. Amongst regular show fans, Benson is almost universally loved, and it's not really hard to see why, as he's easily one of the most likable characters in the entire series. But the craziest thing is, he didn't start off that way. And believe it or not, at one point in time, Benson was honestly one of the most hated characters in the entire show. But through my multiple different times talking about Benson online, I've noticed a common trend between him and the fans. And that trend was, when the fans were younger, they hated Benson, but as they got older, the more and more they started to love him. But why is that? Well, let's take it back to the very beginning. Benson was introduced in the very first episode of regular show, and even though he didn't play that big of a role, with the episode mainly focused around Mordecai and Rigby, with him, Skips, and Pops all being side characters, we did learn a couple things about Benson in this episode. Number one being that he's the park manager, meaning he's Mordecai and Rigby's boss. And number two probably being the funniest, he gets very, and I mean very, mad at Mordecai and Rigby's stunts, oftentimes ending with him yelling at them. And honestly, as a kid, it felt like Benson's whole personality was just yelling at Mordecai and Rigby. And as ashamed as I am to admit it, I too was one of the people who didn't really like Benson at first. Now, before the hate mob starts, obviously I can objectively look back now and say that Benson was almost 100% right every time he went off on Mordecai and Rigby. But you have to see it from this perspective. Before regular show really started highlighting the main 7 members of the park crew as an ensemble story, the early days of regular show mainly just focused on the week-to-week adventures of Mordecai and Rigby. They were the main characters, the reason you tuned in every week, the focus of the entire show. And I can't name a single good show where you don't like your main characters. Now, also keep in mind, I'm currently 22. The first episode of regular show came out way back in 2010, 14 years ago. That means I would have been 8 years old watching this. So me, this little 8-year-old who's never had a job before, never worked for anyone, never been in the real world, didn't have any life experience, and didn't know a thing about anything, is watching this gumball machine yell at my main characters on a week-to-week basis and is thinking to himself, man, this guy is a bad boss. I hope I never work for anyone like him. He's a jerk. It also didn't help that we had episodes like Think Positive, where Benson would yell at Mordecai and Rigby so much that Pops would have to step in and tell Benson that if he kept yelling at Mordecai and Rigby, he would have no choice but to fire him. And also episodes like Excellent, where Rigby would end up eating himself into a coma, and Benson would infamously say that maybe if he focused more on working, he wouldn't be in this situation, which was probably his worst moment in the entire show, and honestly kind of out of character for him. But like I said, I felt this way as an 8-year-old, but now as a 22-year-old who still doesn't know much about anything, but knows a little bit more than when I was 8, I can clearly see that Benson was not only not a bad boss, but he was a great boss, and the problem almost 99% of the time was actually Mordecai and Rigby. Something I noticed while rewatching regular show is that Benson almost never yells at any other park crew member outside of Mordecai and Rigby. He might get aggravated with Muscle Man every once in a while, but it's never to the same degree that we see with our 2 main characters. And I'm not even trying to be dramatic, but Benson was honestly a saint for never firing these guys. I mean, in one of the very first episodes, Benson gives Mordecai and Rigby the simple task of putting up folding chairs for a kid's birthday party, and tells them that if they can do this task without any mess ups, next time he'll upgrade them to a more complicated task. You know, trying to build trust with his employees like a good boss would. Benson then leaves the park to go pick up the kids for their birthday party, and what does he come back to? The destroyer of worlds destroying half the park that Mordecai and Rigby unleashed. And this was literally Benson's life anytime he asked Mordecai and Rigby to do anything. And I brought up the episode Think Positive earlier because it pointed out that Benson does yell at Mordecai and Rigby a lot. But what I didn't talk about was that in the second half of the episode, once Mordecai and Rigby found out that if Benson yelled at them, he'd get fired, they completely took advantage of this situation, purposely messing up at their job or purposely not doing their job at all because they knew Benson couldn't yell at them and they knew Benson wasn't going to fire them. And they did it so much to the point that Benson became a boiling rage of anger that was going to melt the park unless he was able to let his anger out. But the crazy thing is, in this episode, this is probably the angriest we've ever seen Benson, which is actually remarkable because purposely not doing their jobs or purposely messing up at their jobs to get Benson mad is not even close to the worst things that Mordecai and Rigby have ever done to him. Because on top of not doing their jobs, endangering the lives of all the park members, and having the park destroyed multiple times, one time they actually almost killed Benson. In the episode Weekend at Benson's, Mordecai and Rigby are struggling to put in a light bulb, even though it's literally the both of them. So Benson tells them to get down so he can climb up the ladder and do it himself. But while Mordecai and Rigby are supposed to be holding the ladder so that Benson can put in the light bulb, they start horsing around and end up knocking Benson off the top of the ladder, landing head first on the ground. Now thank God Benson didn't die, but just imagine that. Imagine you're the boss of some place and two of your workers can't even put in a light bulb. So you go to do it yourself and all they have to do is hold the ladder and they end up knocking you unconscious. Y'all would probably get rid of those workers. And look, I know I said as a kid I didn't really like Benson, but if I'm being honest, there was always one episode that really made me feel for him, and the older I get, it just hits even more. And that's the season 3 episode Busted Carts. It starts off with Mordecai and Rigby slacking off again using one of the carts to do tricks. While this is going on, Benson is getting an evaluation by his boss Mr. Maylard. And Maylard tells Benson that the park looks great and that he's doing a good job, but almost immediately after he says that, the cart that Mordecai and Rigby were using flies by, smashing into a tree. Maylard then takes Benson into his office where he yells at him and tells Benson that if the cart doesn't get fixed, he's gonna lose his job. The only problem is the warranty for the cart expires the next day and it's so far away that Benson would have to drive all day and night just to get there. But nonetheless, in an attempt to save his job, Benson heads out to the car dealership and actually makes it pretty far to where he can make it in time. But while he's driving, he sees Mordecai and Rigby in his rearview mirror as they hid in the back of the truck because they wanted to come along and help because they feel bad that Benson might get fired because of them. Benson tells them that if they're going to stay, they need to do everything that he tells them to do. But this only leads to them messing up and Benson getting pulled over by the cops. But even after this, Benson still tries to be cool with Mordecai and Rigby, bonding with them over music. Fast forward in the episode and Benson is dozing in and out from driving all day. Mordecai tells Benson that him and Rigby will keep driving to the place while he can get some sleep. And even though Benson is skeptical, he tells Mordecai and Rigby that they can drive and to wake him up in 2 hours. And even though Mordecai and Rigby do keep driving towards the car dealership, they take a detour when they see an arcade on the side of the road. They tell each other that they're going to stay in there for 30 minutes, but end up staying until the morning. And when Benson wakes up, he is understandably furious, dragging Mordecai and Rigby out of the arcade. Mordecai and Rigby then try to apologize to Benson and give him some type of excuse, but it's in this scene that we get one of the rawest performances of emotion in the entire series.
Don't you two understand? I'm about to lose my job! You may not care about keeping your jobs, but I care about keeping mine! Because if I lose my job, I have nothing! Do you hear me? I have nothing!
And man, this scene gave me chills the first time I watched it. To all the fans that thought Benson was just the annoying grumpy boss, this scene gave a whole new perspective. Benson wasn't some jerk or some buzzkill that didn't want Mordecai and Rigby to have fun. He was a boss that simply just wanted work to get done, and he gave Mordecai and Rigby countless chance after chance. And how did they oftentimes repay him? By slacking off and causing trouble. And in other episodes, we would see Mordecai and Rigby cause trouble, but there was never really any consequences. Maybe the park would be destroyed, but it would all be reset by the next episode, so we never really saw the effects of Mordecai and Rigby's actions. But in this moment, we see that not only does Mordecai and Rigby's actions have consequences, but they affect Benson directly. Thankfully though, by the end of the episode, the three do make it to the dealership in time and Benson's job is saved. But that's the reason why me and many other regular show fans love Benson so much. Because even though Mordecai and Rigby do things that affect him directly all the time, he never just fires them or treats them bad. Rather, he always gives them another chance because he wants them to be better. In the same episode, after Benson was pulled over by the cops, he tells Mordecai and Rigby that he doesn't want to hear another word from them for the rest of the ride. Rigby in a genuine voice asks Benson why does he hate them so much, and this was Benson's response.
I I don't hate you guys. I just hate some of the things you do. Okay, I really hate some of the things you do. I know you don't mean them, but I'm your boss, and it's my job to push you to do better.
And the thing is, Benson wasn't lying in this moment. Throughout the series, we would see on multiple occasions that Benson doesn't hate Mordecai and Rigby. He doesn't even dislike them. Benson only wants them to be better and learn responsibility. In a way, he's kinda like a father-like figure trying to mature them. And we even see that when Mordecai and Rigby do their job, Benson is one of the coolest people towards them. He's genuinely just a guy trying to be a good boss and work with them. But it even goes beyond just being their boss. Benson genuinely cares for Mordecai and Rigby as people. When Mordecai was depressed and heartbroken over Margaret thinking that she was engaged, Benson was the one to go talk to Mordecai and tell him that he needs to go talk to Margaret and at least let her know how he feels. And when Rigby wanted to make a change in his life and be a better person but was still falling into his old habits, Benson was the one to give him a speech that made him rethink how he was acting and ultimately put him on a better path. On top of this, we've seen multiple times when Mordecai and Rigby would get into serious trouble, Benson would step in to help even if he had to put his life on the line. But it's not just Mordecai and Rigby. Throughout the seasons, we would see that Benson deeply cares about each and every one of his employees, not only going above and beyond to help them, but also doing things to build better relationships with them. Benson frequently does things like take his employees out to eat, plan group activities, and even planning holiday events, inviting everybody's families over. Benson tries to build a strong connection with all of his employees and make an environment that all of them can enjoy. And we see in the final episode, even 25 years later, the relationship that Benson built with his employees are still strong and intact. Benson was never a cruel or mean boss that just picked on Mordecai and Rigby for no reason. Rather, he was just a guy trying to keep some sense of responsibility going around at the park. And though he would have many conflicts with Mordecai and Rigby in the earlier seasons, in the later seasons, Mordecai and Rigby would really come to appreciate Benson alongside the rest of the park crew. One of my favorite episodes that shows this is the episode The Parky Awards. The episode starts off with the park crew sitting at a table at the annual Parky Awards. Benson's excited because he's been nominated for Park Manager of the Year, an award that's usually won every year by Gene, but this year Benson thinks he has a good shot at winning. But unfortunately, Benson does lose to Gene again this year, which makes him very disappointed and he just wants to go home. While on the ride back, the park crew tries to make Benson feel better by trying to take him out and have some fun, but Benson isn't really feeling it. But just as Benson says this, Rigby reveals that he actually stole the Best Park Manager award from Gene when he wasn't looking, and he did it so that Benson could feel what it's like to get the award. Benson then takes the award from Rigby and then calls Gene to try to return it, but only gets its voicemail. But while holding the award, Benson starts to smile and opens up to the idea of going celebrate with the guys. They then go on a crazy spree around the town, having fun and living it up. The crew then ends up at the top of a cliff, and Benson talks about how good it would have felt to actually win the award because he had one of the best speeches planned. That's when Muscleman suggests that maybe Benson can give his speech. The crew then goes back to the venue where the Parky Awards was held, and Benson goes on stage to give his speech. But right as Benson is about to give his speech, the crew is attacked by the ghosts of the former park managers that never won any awards. A fight then breaks out between the ghost and the crew, but is then stopped by Benson. Benson suggests that why don't all of them just go one by one and have their moment by taking turns giving a speech with the trophy. The ghosts then go one by one to give their acceptance speech until it's Benson's turn. Benson then goes up to give his speech but is interrupted by Gene, who has came back to get his trophy. Disappointed that he never won the award and disappointed that he never got to give an acceptance speech, Benson suggests that the crew just go back to the park. And as the crew arrives back to the park, Benson gets ready to head home. But just as Benson is about to get in the car and go home, the crew reveals that they made their own Parky Award for Benson and tells him to come up and give a speech. And honestly, this is one of the nicest moments in all of Regular Show. And what I like the most about this episode is not only how it shows just how much the park crew means to Benson, but it also shows how much they appreciate him and how far they're willing to go to not only be there for him, but to make him happy. And I think that's mainly because throughout all of Regular Show, Benson is one of the most solid characters that we meet. He's not perfect by any means, but he always tries his best to do the right thing. Whether that's trying to be a good boss, trying to be a good friend, or just trying to be the best gumball machine that he can be. And that's the reason why me and many other Regular Show fans love Benson. But let me know, what did you think? Did you like Benson as a character, or were you just never really a fan of him? Let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure to like the video as it helps me and the channel out by pushing the content out to more people. And follow me on all my socials where I talk about everything animated from anime to cartoons. And until then, it's been your boy CornXV, and I'm off this.
Up in this tank, yeah, it's over. Turn on bus master like cold. Pull up in Rovers, it's over. Bitch, I'm cheese sauce, so this cold. Llama, it can't want no hoes. Bottle, it can't let me pour. High as fun, just like a float. Wanna glow, let me show you. We love charcters. I don't need